Okay, so imagine you're just, getting ready for a garage sale.
Uh-huh.
Like a nice morning, it's a Friday.
Yeah.
You're prepping for a trip to Disney World,
Yeah.
like a nice anniversary trip.
Sounds lovely.
Your husband just left for work, everything seems fine.
Right.
And then bam, you're shot.
Oh my gosh.
This isn't a movie.
Right.
This is what happened to Liz Barazza
Yeah, wow.
in January of 2019. And to this day,
Uh-huh.
her case is unsolved.
That's so scary.
It is.
And it's the kind of thing I think that really grips people.
Yeah.
Because it feels like it could happen to anyone.
Right.
You're just at home in your driveway.
Yeah.
And this happens.
Yeah, just getting ready to, make a couple extra bucks for your trip.
Yeah.
So we're gonna delve into the details of the Liz Barazza case in this deep dive.
Okay.
The evidence, the theories, the questions,
Okay.
all that good stuff.
Sounds good.
And our primary source for this deep dive is an episode of Surlessly,
Okay.
which is a true crime podcast.
Yep.
That was dedicated to Liz's story. So to start off, who was Liz Barazza?
So Liz was, by all accounts, a really bright light
Okay.
in her community. She was a huge Harry Potter and Star Wars fan.
Okay.
And she and her husband Sergio were actually active in the 501st Legion.
Wow, the 501st.
Yeah.
So the costuming.
Yes, the Star Wars costuming groups that do all that charity work.
Okay.
So they would volunteer at hospitals and things like that and bring a lot of joy to patients, especially kids.
Oh, wow.
Dressed as their favorite characters.
So that makes this even more jarring, I would say.
Yeah, for sure.
Because she sounds like such a light and such a positive person.
Right.
So let's go back to the morning of January 25th, 2019. Can you walk us through what happened?
So it was just a seemingly ordinary Friday.
Okay.
Liz was at home setting up for a garage sale to, again, make some extra cash for her and Sergio's trip to Disney World.
Yep.
Sergio left for work a little bit before 7 a.m. And just minutes later, neighbors reported hearing gunshots and called 911.
So scary.
Yeah, it's awful.
And this is where the story takes another turn for the worse.
Yeah,
right?
Unfortunately.
Because Liz ended up at the same hospital that she volunteered at.
Yes, Memorial Hermann Hospital.
Wow.
She was airlifted there, but sadly, she died from her injuries the next day.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
That's just awful.
It's incredibly sad.
So what about the initial investigation?
So when police arrive at the scene,
Yeah.
it's chaos. They find Sergio there.
Okay.
He was alerted by their home security system.
Oh, wow.
So he rushes home and finds his house just swarmed with officers.
Oh, my God.
So he's initially detained and questioned by police.
I mean, I can only imagine
Yeah.
in that situation.
Right.
If you're the husband.
Yeah, and there's a murder, and you're right there.
They have to ask you questions.
Of course.
So he was ultimately cleared, though, as a suspect.
That's right.
So if Sergio is not involved, what leads do police have?
So there is some surveillance footage that's taken from the neighbors' houses.
Okay.
And it captures images of a dark-colored Nissan Frontier truck.
Okay.
Approaching Liz's driveway shortly before the shooting.
Okay.
The footage is grainy.
Okay.
It shows a shadowy figure, and it looks like they're wearing a robe.
Interesting.
Or a trench coat.
Like a robe or like a trench coat.
Right.
Okay, that's an interesting detail.
It is.
Now, there's been a lot of discussion online about a possible traffic stop shortly after the shooting that involved a similar vehicle.
Yeah.
What do we know about that?
So there are some unverified reports online about a possible traffic stop.
Okay.
And a deputy pulling over a vehicle that matches the description literally minutes after the shooting.
Minutes.
Yeah, it was very soon after.
Oh, wow.
But the details of this stop, if it even happened, remain a mystery.
Wow.
No official information has ever been released.
That's so strange.
It is.
I mean, why wouldn't they? I don't know.
Release that.
Especially in a case like this.
Especially when it's unsolved.
Right.
And they pulled over a vehicle that matches the description.
Yeah. It's very strange.
Okay, and then there was also conflicting timelines. Right.
Yeah, so there's a discrepancy in some of the police reports.
Okay.
And it has to do with when the truck was sighted.
Okay.
One of the reports mentions that the truck was seen at 12:30 a.m. on January 26th.
Okay.
So that's the day after.
The day after the murder.
Right. So it could just be a clerical error.
Yeah.
But it does raise some questions.
Yeah, like was the killer like scoping out the place?
Right, like did they come back?
The day before, the day after? I mean, that's creepy.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the suspect. What do we know?
So, unfortunately, not a lot.
Okay.
Because the video footage is so grainy, you can't really tell if it's a male or female.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lot of debate online about, is it a man? Is it a woman?
And their clothing doesn't offer a lot of clues either.
Yeah, we already talked about that. So with so little to go on, what are some of the theories in this case?
Well, the theories really range widely. There's some speculation that it was a personal connection.
Okay.
Others think it was a random attack.
Okay.
Maybe a robbery gone wrong.
Uh-huh.
Everyone who knew Liz describes her as being a very kind and generous person
Okay.
and said that she didn't have any enemies.
Okay.
But the shooting itself seemed very calculated.
Yeah.
You know, some have even used the term execution style,
Right.
with 3 shots to the chest and then a final shot to the head.
Yeah.
So it makes you think it was more deliberate.
It doesn't sound random at all.
It doesn't.
So.
And the fact that the killer spoke to Liz before shooting her.
Right.
Briefly.
Briefly, but still it could point to some sort of familiarity
Right.
or some sort of
A motive, maybe?
specific intent.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Sergio for a second. As you mentioned, he was cleared by the police.
Yes.
But the timing is suspect, right?
It is suspicious.
I mean, he left for work just minutes before the shooting.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if the killer knew his schedule
For sure.
and was waiting for him to leave.
It's very possible.
And were Liz and Sergio targeted?
Right. Or was it just Liz?
Yeah. And even the lead detective said that there was a possibility that the killer drove by again later to, like, make sure.
To see if the job was done.
Yeah, that's what he said.
Oh, wow.
Which makes things even more complicated.
It does.
So this is like a big puzzle with missing pieces.
Yeah, it really is.
And then to add even more mystery, there's that new footage
Right.
that surfaced 2 years after the murder.
Yeah, the Ring doorbell camera footage.
So this new footage was released in 2021.
Yes,
But even that kind of adds to the confusion,
it does.
right?
Yeah,
Because it appears that the footage is actually from Liz's camera,
that's right.
not from a neighbor's camera.
Yeah.
Even though it was originally reported that it was from a neighbor.
Yeah, that's what's so weird about it.
Okay, so the audio has been enhanced,
Yes,
but it's still hard to make out what's being said.
it's very muffled.
Okay.
Some think they can hear Liz saying good morning.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like maybe to the killer.
Oh, wow.
And other people think they hear a male voice.
Oh, wow. So we don't even know
Right.
if she's talking to a man or a woman, potentially.
It's unclear.
That's so eerie.
It really is.
So where does the case stand now?
So unfortunately, it's still unsolved.
Oh, that's so frustrating.
It is. It's a case that continues to haunt that community.
Yeah.
And, of course, Liz's family.
Yeah.
They've been really relentless, though, in their pursuit of justice.
Okay.
They've increased the reward money.
Good.
They use social media a lot to keep Liz's story in the public eye.
Okay.
Sergio has since remarried,
Okay.
but the case itself
So it's cold.
remains cold, yes.
It's just heartbreaking to think that her killer is still out there.
It is.
And this case is such a reminder that even in safe neighborhoods,
Yeah, you never know.
danger can be lurking.
Right.
So we'll continue to unpack this mystery after a quick break.
Okay.
Make sure you're subscribed to the deep dive so you don't miss part 2 of our exploration into Liz Barazza case.
All right, sounds good.
We'll be right back.
Okay. So we were just discussing the Ring doorbell footage and how even with those enhancements, it's still really hard to make out what's being said.
Yeah, it's like you want to get some kind of clue from that footage,
Right.
but you just can't.
Exactly.
It's so frustrating.
It really is. And that's been a theme throughout this whole investigation.
Right.
You know, so much of the evidence is inconclusive.
Yeah.
It's open to interpretation.
Like what, for example?
Well, like the lack of physical evidence at the crime scene.
Okay.
No shell casings, no DNA.
Really nothing.
It's almost as if the killer just vanished.
That is strange,
Yeah.
especially for something that seems so calculated.
Right.
Like, wouldn't a professional killer make sure the scene was clean?
You would think so.
Could this point to like an amateur?
It's possible. Someone who maybe panicked,
Right.
didn't think things through.
Right. Or maybe they just didn't have a lot of experience.
Yeah, but we also have to consider that the killer might have taken steps to conceal their presence.
Okay. How so?
Well, maybe they used a revolver,
Okay.
which doesn't inject shell casings.
Yeah.
Or they were just really meticulous about cleaning up after themselves.
So we're back to square one.
Pretty much.
More questions than answers.
Exactly.
It's like a puzzle.
It is.
But going back to the timing of the shooting, minutes after Sergio leaves for work,
Yeah.
it really feels like the killer knew their routine.
It's definitely a possibility.
Like they were watching them.
Yeah, maybe waiting for the perfect moment.
It's kind of like a movie.
It is a scary one.
Yeah, where someone's always watching,
Exactly.
waiting for you to make a mistake.
And this case really plays on those fears.
Yeah, like someone's always there.
The fear of the unknown. Violence erupting in a safe space.
Like you just never know.
Right. It makes you question everything.
Okay, so let's switch gears for a minute and talk about the robbery theory.
Okay.
You mentioned earlier that nothing was actually stolen.
That's right.
Does that mean it wasn't a robbery?
It makes it less likely,
Okay.
but we can't rule it out completely.
Why not?
Well, maybe the killer intended to rob Liz, but something happened.
Like what?
Maybe she resisted,
Okay.
or they panicked and things just escalated.
So you're saying the robbery just went wrong.
Exactly.
It turned violent.
Yeah, we've seen that happen before.
And in the podcast, they mentioned that the detective thinks the killer might have driven by again after the shooting.
Oh, yeah, to make sure she was dead.
Or to make sure no one was around.
Right, so unsettling.
Like imagine being the killer and having to do that.
It's chilling.
Like what kind of person does that?
So it paints a picture of someone who's calculated but also maybe unsure.
Yeah, like they had to go back and double check.
Exactly.
But going back to that new ring footage,
Okay.
there's been a lot of talk about Liz's tone of voice
Yeah, some people think she knew her attacker.
based on how she spoke.
Just on her tone, yeah.
What do you think?
Well, the audio is still really muffled,
Yeah.
even with the enhancements.
Okay.
And we have to remember, Liz was expecting people for the garage sale.
Yeah, that's true.
So saying good morning to someone,
Even a stranger.
even a stranger, wouldn't be unusual.
So it's just a lot of speculation.
It's hard to know for sure.
So based on what we know, what do you think happened?
I think there are several factors that point toward a targeted attack.
Really?
The execution-style shooting,
Yep.
possibly them watching Liz and Sergio,
Okay.
and there's no other motive.
So it's personal.
It seems like it.
But who would want to kill Liz?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah, why?
Yeah, that's what's so baffling about this whole case.
Yeah, what about Sergio?
Well, he was cleared by the police.
Right? But
There is still that cloud of suspicion.
it's hard to ignore the timing.
It is.
He leaves minutes before.
And he was the last one to see her.
But I guess suspicion isn't guilt.
It isn't. The police did a thorough investigation.
And they found nothing.
Nothing connecting him to the crime.
And I know there's been a lot of talk online about Sergio's new wife.
Oh, yeah.
Like maybe she was involved somehow.
It's the internet.
People love a good conspiracy.
They do, but there's no evidence to support that.
So it's all just speculation.
It is just rumors.
And this case already has enough twists and turns.
Right.
We don't need to add to it.
Exactly.
But let's talk about the impact of Liz's murder on her family and the community. I mean, this wasn't just a crime.
It wasn't.
This really impacted a lot of people.
It did. It sent shockwaves through the entire neighborhood.
Yeah, this wasn't just like
Right.
something that happened in a vacuum.
It affected real people.
We're back for the final part of our deep dive into the Liz Barazza case.
Yeah.
And as we've discussed this case, it's just full of unanswered questions, and it's really unsettling. But before we go, I do want to touch on the impact that this tragedy has had on her family and the community.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that beyond, the headlines and the theories and all that, there are real people whose lives have been changed forever by this,
Right.
Liz's family, her friends, the people in her neighborhood. They've all been dealing with this loss and the fear that comes after something so senseless happens.
Yeah, for her family, it's not just the grief of losing her, but it's also the lack of answers.
Yeah. The fact that whoever did this is still out there.
Right. And maybe living a normal life while they're just trying to cope with this huge loss.
Exactly. It's just heartbreaking to think about. And then there's also the impact on the community. I mean,
Yeah.
people were terrified after Liz was murdered,
I bet.
They just went about their day thinking they were safe in their neighborhood, and then suddenly that feeling of security is just shattered. And it makes you realize that even in places that seem safe, bad things can happen.
Absolutely. It reminds you that none of us are really immune to these things.
Yeah, you never know.
But, even with the tragedy and the fear, you also see amazing resilience,
Right.
especially from Les's family.
Yeah, they've been amazing.
I mean, they haven't given up on finding justice.
No, they've been so strong.
They've kept her story alive. They've increased the reward money.
And they work so hard to make sure that people don't forget her.
It's really inspiring to see.
It is. They turn their grief into action.
It shows the power of love and hope.
So as we finish up this deep dive, what are some of the big things you want listeners to think about what really stuck out to you about this case?
Well, for me, it's how This horrible crime seems so random, but the way it happened was so precise.
Right. It's like everyday life mixed with something so calculated.
On the one hand, you have this woman getting ready for a garage sale, which is a normal thing.
Right.
And then you have this cold and deliberate act of violence.
And it makes you wonder who would plan something like this.
It makes you wonder if you're ever truly safe.
That's a tough question to answer, but this case definitely highlights how important it is to be aware of what's going on around you
To be alert.
and to trust your gut if something feels wrong.
But it's not about living in fear.
Right.
It's about being careful and doing what you can to keep yourself and your loved ones safe.
You have to find a balance between being aware of danger, but not letting it take over your life.
So as we leave our listeners to think about this case and all its twists and turns,
Uh-huh.
what do you think what happened to Liz? Was it something personal? Is it random? We may never know for sure, but it's a question that I think will stay with everyone who knew her and everyone who's heard her story.
Yeah, it's a mystery that might never be solved, but one thing's for sure, Liz deserves justice and her family deserves closure.
And even though the case might stay open, we can keep her memory alive by talking about what happened and by doing our best to stay safe and also by supporting victims of crimes.
That's a great point, and if anyone listening has any information about this case, no matter how small it seems, please contact the authorities.
Right. You never know what tiny detail could be the missing piece.
And share this episode with anyone you know who might have information.
It could help.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.
Make sure you subscribe for more deep dives into all sorts of interesting topics.
We'll see you next time.
Stay curious and stay informed.